Hello and welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. I'm your host, John S. In today's episode, we'll speak with Steve K., author of 12-Step Philosophy of Alcoholics Anonymous, an interpretation by Steve K. Steve, how you doing? Welcome to AA Beyond Belief, the podcast.
Hi, John. It's great to speak to you on this.
Yes, it's very nice. After corresponding with you on Facebook and email all this time for, I think, a couple of years. Now
since you started AA Beyond Belief, really.
Yeah. September 2015 it was. Hard to believe. So we're here to talk about your book, The 12-Step Philosophy of Alcoholics Anonymous, and an interpretation by Steve K. And is this something you've been working on for a long time? And as you were working on it, were you actually developing your philosophy as you were writing it? Or can you kind of go into a little bit about what happened to lead up to writing the book?
I think really it has been a sort of developing process, really, and part of my own learning, I suppose, in that I went through a difficult period as a member of AA in terms of struggling with, the religious language, really, and, the religious ideas, or what I, really saw as Christian ideas. And, I went through a really bad period with that and sort of was on the verge of leaving AA, and I came across a book by Ernest Kurtz, Not God, History of Alcoholics Anonymous, and, that really educated me, I suppose, in sort of terms of the sort of influence, in terms of the influences upon AA philosophy, not just being religious. There's a lot of secular sort of influences, sort of Enlightenment ideas, really, as opposed to principles that American sort of society is based upon that influence that fellowship as well, and it sort of changed my viewpoint a bit, and his book confirmed the Christian sort of influence on AA, but it really opened me up to all these liberal principles and helped me accept that, I could be authentic in terms of my own beliefs and still be a genuine sort of valid member of AA. So that was a start, really, of me doing a lot of thinking around sort of my place in AA and sort of the ideas in AA. And what I did, because of that book, really, it made me sort of reassess the sort of program, and I went over some of my step work, etc. And I made a renewed effort in terms of AA and started going to a lot more meetings, because I was hardly going to any meetings at the time, and really, tried to develop a more positive attitude towards attending meetings and taking part, participating in meetings. And then that lasted about a year, and at the end of that year, I decided I'd done a lot of reading, that followed on from reading Ernie Kurtz, and decided to sort of, I suppose, to help consolidate my learning, to write an essay, on my interpretation of the steps. So it started with just one essay, and that's all I intended doing. I didn't know, I thought, write a couple of thousand words or something, and that turned into quite a lengthy sort of essay, more like 7,000 or 8,000 words. And then I just carried on from there, really, and sort of when I get ideas, I'd write about them. And then I came across sites like Agnostica, and there are some other sites in this country that are a bit sort of similar sort of theme, if you like. But Agnostica really had a sort of profound effect on me, really, in that, again, it sort of helped me accept me, my views within AA, and realise that, they were okay. I found I got a new sponsor that was really, accepting of my views, and that helped a lot as well. So, I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting as I read that it was Ernest Kurtz that really influenced you, and that you recognized, something, the liberal principles behind AA beyond just the religious aspect. And, as I read through your interpretation of the steps, in my opinion, it's something that anybody could be comfortable with, regardless of your belief system. It's you're taking a non-theistic approach, I suppose, but if you have a belief in God, I think that these are perfectly compatible as well. So your book is really broken down into 3 parts, really. You're looking at the steps, you're looking at the practice of virtue, and then there's some additional essays. And let's go into a little bit about that first part. And there's a lot of information to cover here, so I'm not sure how we'll go through it. But let's can you give us like a brief overview, I guess, of how you interpret the steps and how you experience them? That's a difficult task, but do you think you could give that a try?
Well, I suppose, because my book starts off really with my sort of recovery story, which I added later. That came later, really. But the first essay that I wrote was, starting from step 1, and I think the first part is quite a traditional take on the steps, really. Apart from open it up to a sort of, if you like, a more liberal interpretation, or try and be inclusive, really. But it is, I open it up, I admit, sort of where my sort of position, and, open it up to, a broader sort of humanism, / spirituality, be like broad spirituality. I open it up to that, really, and try and, make it inclusive. Like you said, really, it's sort of almost neutral in terms of, if you... I think if you were AA mainstream, you wouldn't have a problem with this book. In fact, I've got friends that are AA mainstream that have read it, and they think it's really good, sort of thing. It doesn't challenge their beliefs or anything, But, it's sort of, I think it's helpful, and I have helped people with some of the work in here that are quite sort of strong atheists that I've come across in AA, and I've sort of helped them, if you like, sort of open their mind to a more natural understanding of spirituality in terms of principles rather than some supernatural being, So, and that's really what I began to see through reading Ernie Kurtz, and then at the same time I was studying moral philosophy a bit, so I was looking at the work of Aristotle and the Stoic philosophers, and then, sort of, I suppose I wanted to sort of get my head around the history of ideas, really, and sort of, some of the ideas we've got in modern psychology, to see where they came from, and that they sort of, I chase that back to, ancient sort of Greek philosophy and the sort of Stoics, and a lot of modern Western ideas as well are born of the Enlightenment period, and I suppose reading around that sort of stuff, I began to see the principles, how that was really, I could sort of apply that to the AA program, and the principles inherent within the AA program. So, they started off with just a traditional sort of take, and then I've got a background in sort of counselling, so I've studied sort of, therapy and psychology quite a bit in the past, and I wanted to include, try and comment in relation to those theories as well in terms of the steps. So I do touch on like person-centered theory and cognitive behavioural therapy. I try and refer to them as sort of just as in passing, really. I don't go into it in detail or anything, but in passing, in say like 6 and 7 I mentioned person-centered theory, and step 4 I mentioned CBT and stuff like that, and some of the humanistic principles within person-centered, like self-actualizing tendency and stuff like that. I've tried to bring that in a little bit and refer to stuff like that. That people, because they're more familiar with, a lot of people are more familiar with that sort of psychological ideas, aren't they? Sort of thing. So it's sort of try and make it accessible that way, really. So it was just to try and make it a bit more accessible, sort of inclusive for people that didn't, go with the sort of strong sort of religious sort of theme that's in the basic literature.
Sure. And even just having the modern language too, it's nice for perhaps a newcomer who might want to have a good understanding of the steps. It's kind of nice to have something like this to read through in today's vernacular. But do you want to talk a little bit about, I don't know, you mentioned in your book that, you don't think that it's very difficult for, somebody that's a non-believer to with a little imagination to practice these steps. And I don't think so either. In fact, I kind of found it when I first kind of came to the conclusion that I don't hold a belief in a God. One of the first things I did was take a look at these steps, and I didn't find it too difficult because I could really see the underlying principles and actions behind them. I suppose the one that people get hung up on a lot if they don't use their imagination is step 3. You want to talk about that a little bit? How you would approach step 3?
I suppose really with all of them, it's sort of applying principles rather than let's say this idea of in terms of a higher power.
Right.
I'm just sort of thinking about, particularly at that stage, because I say you know me a little bit, and sort of my sort of openness to spirituality has grown a bit over the last few years. And really, it's because I've become comfortable, if you like, with my own humanistic ideas and sort of position in AA. I've been more open about that. I've explored it more. And because I've not been, I suppose that's taken away defensiveness around the more religious ideas, because I used to be quite hostile. And I found that because I accepted myself, within AA, and my ideas were okay, it made me just less sort of hostile and less defensive around other people's beliefs, and the sort of maybe I've been willing to listen more to that or explore those ideas as well. Not that I've changed me sort of thinking that I believe in the traditional idea of God, but I've always, I suppose, I think. If you go into, like the second part of the book, when you go into virtue and the practices of virtue, if you sort of go into those ideas, it sort of opens you up to, I feel, spirituality in a broad way. You can sort of link it to, a sort of, I don't know, broader openness to the mystery of the universe, if you like, sort of thing. So, I think I'm struggling a bit with the I suppose was stuff. I'm trying, like when I wrote that the essay, this first part, it was a good few years ago, sort of thing. So I'm trying to just refresh my memory of where I was at the time.
Sure. I mean that's the thing. This is kind of a process for all of us, but I know for me, I guess I focus on the decision to change and to go through to practice these principles as best as I can, as I understand them at the time, which is always an evolving understanding. One thing I learned a few things from reading your book too, because I have not read a lot of, really hardly any of the Stoics or of Aristotle and so forth. And there was something you wrote there, I think, in the virtue section where you wrote about Aristotle, and I think was it that the practicing virtue is finding the mean between the extremes? Is that what you were? Am I getting that right?
Yeah, no, that's a sort of I don't know, definition really of his, one of the definitions used in his theory. It's sort of it's the average, isn't it, really, between, so I give examples of courage as a point between cowardice and foolhardy, or humility as between prideful and low self-esteem, or, being right-sized. I just picked that up from reading a bit about his theory, really. But what I got from it was it's quite simple. It's very, the different, there's like 3 main approaches to moral psychology, and his was the sort of simplest, really, and the one that I sort of, I don't know, found, because I was into practicing myself, and I saw within the steps, sort of thing, that it was about, if you practice virtue, you become virtuous, so if you want, we're encouraged, aren't we, to do sort of practice honesty and, humility as part of a 12-step program. So, his sort of thing was, if you practice those things, they become part of your character. They actually sort of change, I suppose, or develop who you are, if you like. And that, if you develop your character in a virtuous way, that will help you, rather than go from any sort of place of reason or, outcome, as the other two approaches do. Your inner sort of character, your intuition, if you like, will make you make the right moral decisions. I think that's what he's saying there, that if you're a virtuous person, you will make the right moral decisions.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of been my experience without even knowing it. And even as I was going to meetings, traditional meetings, I would hear people talk about, trying to find that middle ground. And, humility is something that, for whatever reason, the group that I went to, and maybe this is AA overall, really talked a lot about humility. And I'm not sure, I think that I go with what you wrote, that it's between pridefulness and low self-esteem. So it's like, they say in AA, being right-sized, having a realistic view of yourself. It's a challenge. I think I'm better now. When I was really young, in the program, in young period, I did struggle with self-esteem issues. Like you, I had a background where there was some instability in my household, or some, not really knowing what to expect. So I think I had a hard time with, when I started getting better, or I started having some success in life, if I would talk about that, I would sometimes think that I was engaging in that self-centeredness that I'm trying to tamper, and not practicing humility. But that's really not the case, I think that a lot of people still kind of misunderstand that concept a little bit of humility.
Yeah, well, I'll say, it's quite often associated with either, humiliation, don't they?
Yeah.
And sort of see it as a sort of putting them down almost, sort of putting themselves down. So they can, sort of struggle with, that way, or, it's maybe against a healthy sense of pride. Because I think it's okay to have a healthy sense of pride, isn't it? Sort of in, who you are, what your sort of achievements are, to sort of have healthy self-esteem. You're not sort of conceited, or anything like that. It's just a healthy sense of who you are. Good self-esteem, that's a healthy thing, So it's trying to find that middle. I know I had sort of barriers, or still is a barrier to humility for me, is low self-esteem. It's something I really struggle with. Despite, sort of intellectually maybe knowing better, from an emotional level, I can get, triggered into low self-esteem very easily. Sort of anxious, because of it, sort of thing. So I do some work for an addiction treatment organisation, and it's people in fairly early recovery, within the first year, most of them, sort of thing, of recovery. But they are, they're quite committed. They're all people that are committed. They have stopped drinking, etc. And the low self-esteem in those groups, is something I really try and work on with people. Trying to build in that group, I really try and build the self-esteem. I just see it as a common denominator within people in recovery. Really, you come across the odd person that doesn't seem to have an issue with it much, but most, are pretty insecure, really. I find in the rooms, So I don't think it'd be any different over there, Really. But just thinking as well, going back to it, just sort of came to me really. That's what I suppose I didn't really answer your question around step 3. And, I know that at that time, what I was really trying to, how I was trying to sort of go with step 3, and maybe explain it to other people that I came across that did have a problem with surrendering themselves to this supernatural power, was, treating the rooms as, the fellowship and the program as a power greater. Because I could see that the principles within the program and, the sort of, the if you like, the love and sort of spirit of humanity within the fellowship were a power greater than me. And if I, gave myself to the fellowship and the program, the principles within the program, they were capable of bringing around in a change within me, for the better, sort of thing. So I was very much with that, and I still go with that to a large degree now. Say I've opened it up a little bit in terms of spiritual ideas, a little bit, or principles. But very much went with that, and I've helped people sort of access, if you like, that step through those ideas really. And I go into it in my sort of interpretation of step 3. I do say about it depends, sort of how is step 3 applied. I said it depends on your understanding of a power greater, and based on the fellowship of AA and the 12-step program of recovery as a power greater, I would suggest the following. And then I just got to talk about being fully, participating with the fellowship and the program. And, I think if you do that, it does what it says on the tin, really. It helps you stay sober, and, you know, you tend to sort of, you know, lead a better way of life, really. Depending on what you've been like before. But I know me, I definitely needed to change. I mean, people, you know, I've heard it sort of, you know, got into debates, if you like, or discussion on your side with people that don't like to sort of focus on morality too much, do they, you know? But I know for me, with my background, it was some of my sort of thinking and behaviour wasn't very healthy, you know, and it did need to change in a healthy moral direction, you know, sort of thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with morality. I don't see it as tied to religion or anything like that, you know.
No, I don't either.
Human values, isn't it, really? Decent human values.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. For me, I kind of look at it as building character, and I don't care who you are. If everybody can build character.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, it's a constant, lifelong thing.
Yeah. So hopefully that answers your question on step 3. Sort of, you know, go with that. Really, I did think anybody who struggles with that concept of something, you know, external sort of authority, sort of outside of themselves, to sort of go with that, really.
Yeah. And see, we have the freedom as individuals to interpret the steps. You don't have to, you know, take everything so literally and strictly. And even the program, I mean, the people in the program were telling me early on that, you know, I could use whatever conception of a higher power I so choose, or not, you know. And for me, and I think for everybody to a certain degree, everybody kind of relies on their fellows and who they meet in the program. And some people find an external force as well, which is perfectly fine. And I'm actually coming to respect that more and more. Doing a little bit of reading about Native American culture, I'm gaining a little bit more appreciation for the cultures where this sense of spirituality is really deeply ingrained. And I would never want to rob somebody of that. It's an important thing for building community. And when that's robbed from a culture, it can be a devastating thing. And that's kind of happened from what I'm reading right now in the Native American culture. They were, you know, their way of life was disrupted, and their spiritual practices that for centuries that they had practiced were kind of broken, and it's caused a lot of problems. So yeah, it's kind of giving me some thought to have a little bit more respect for people who do have, you know, views that I might think of as supernatural, but to at least respect those people and understand that there's some value and importance to that.
Yeah, and you know, you can't sort of complain, you know, because I know you've struggled with the sort of fundamentalist sort of element within the fellowship, and I have in the past as well. And you know, the problem with that is when you come across intolerance of your beliefs, your, you know, sort of agnostic or atheist beliefs, and you know, they're telling you not doing it properly, and you should leave the fellowship and stuff like that, you know. And I've heard that sort of thing said to people who've expressed those, you know, secular views, and you know, you can't complain about them being intolerant and judgmental, etc., you know, and then sort of do it yourself where they're concerned, really. And I've noticed that when I went through that difficult period, and I used to sort of rebel against the religious sort of language, and you know, I did used to undermine people. I'm quite a strong character. I used to undermine people's shares and stuff like that, and tell them they were talking rubbish and stuff, you know. And I got a lot of, you know, sort of bad reactions through being like that, and a lot of rejection, you know. And no wonder when I think back of it, you know, when I think back on it, really. And I found that once I accepted myself, I didn't need to be undermining anybody else. I didn't need to be defensive. And I found that I stopped getting, people were okay with my beliefs, you know.
Sure.
And again, I don't know what it's, mainstream AA over here is pretty liberal and tolerant, and anything goes, really, you know. That people don't have a problem with atheists and agnostics in AA. The meeting at my home group, you know, there's quite a few agnostics and atheists, well, particularly, you know, quite sort of militant atheists. One of them is particularly, you know, and he's really popular in the group. No one has a problem with him, you know. And you know, it's a Bob standard traditional AA meeting over here. So yeah, and just reflecting, I had a bit of a read of Ernie Kurtz's book the other day, just to sort of you know, I don't know, familiarise myself with the part two of it, in particular around the liberal principles. And what I saw through reading that, I saw that, I mean, he says in that part two that AA is a very American fellowship, and it goes on then in terms of, the influences upon the fellowship. And, what I saw was, what it really got me doing as well when I read that book was start studying the traditions, the sort of principles that fellowship's based upon. Mm-hmm. And I could see, I don't know much about American society, but I know that it's built on liberal principles and, Enlightenment principles right. that were born of the Enlightenment, like autonomy, democracy, equality, freedom of the individual, freedom of speech, right. etc. But the welfare of the whole as well, and tolerance is a massive liberal principle,
yes.
So I can see how they're embedded throughout the traditions, those principles are.
Right.
So if we're all following those, we shouldn't have a problem with diversity, within the fellowship. We should be accepting of difference. And that's how it should be.
Yeah.
But we're not perfect, are we? And people aren't perfect. They get, sort of brainwashed into their sort of ideas, if you like, and they become dogmatic and then start, being judgmental and intolerant of people that don't think like they do,
Yeah.
But luckily, the group I go to is quite a tolerant group, and people, the
sure.
traditions are sort of followed, etc. So it's a healthy group, and I think
sure.
if you go to a healthy group, I don't feel the need to go to an agnostic group mm-hmm. because I'm accepted where I go,
right.
and I do like, some of the sort of, if you like, more religious people, some of the values and that they've got, I share with them,
mm-hmm.
I don't share the content, if you like, of some of the doctrines they follow,
sure.
if you like, but a lot of the values and how I see them behave, I'm sort of, I'm all right with that. I'm sort of inspiring, some of them are,
Yeah. I have no problem actually either with just the traditional, approach to AA because for me, I'm always looking at the underlying actions, the behaviors, the principles, and not so much the beliefs. I can respect someone's beliefs, but for me, that's the least important part, other than maybe perhaps a belief that there's hope, that this could work. That if I do these things and follow these suggestions, I perhaps might change, I might improve. It might be easier for me to stay sober. So yeah, in that sense, belief is helpful, but I try not to get too hung up in debating with people about what they do or don't believe. And besides, really in AA, all we're doing is sharing our experience, and that experience is based upon where we've been and where we are, and we're constantly changing, and we're constantly getting new information and learning and evolving and growing. So, what I believe today, my approach and how I share in meetings could very well change, 5 years from now or 2 years from now or a month from now. So the weak part for me with this whole, with the steps now, I don't practice meditation, and I did at one time, but you did talk about prayer and meditation, and that you have no problem with that as for a non-believer to do this, and I like the way that you're looking at prayer as sort of like a reflection. You want to kind of talk about that a little bit, how you experience that?
Yeah, I do quote a Buddhist sort of idea of prayer. Sort of that really resonated with me when I came across that, and that was in one of Ernie Kurtz's books as well. Mm-hmm. In that, I think it's in the last one that he did, the Experiencing Spirituality. Yeah, as it was a way really, and I sort of see prayer as a way of reinforcing, if you like, the values and principles I want to live by. So I sort of have almost like a bit of a mantra that I say, if you like, to myself in terms of principles and a lot of, stuff that's included, within the steps. I sort of, it's a way of, sort of strengthening those values and principles in me each day, So even like, just staying sober, just wanting to stay sober, you sort of reinforce that goal, if you like, right. Every day I do, it's just part of my step one. But, principles in terms of, other principles in terms of the steps, in terms of, again, sort of living the right way, etc. I just sort of reinforce those, and it's a way of reflecting on them sometimes, and so almost sometimes I'll do an inventory as part of it as well. Yeah, so it is a period of reflection. I'm not big into sort of Eastern type meditation. I do a bit of it. I do try and be mindful of it, and I've quite, sort of quiet my mind and have a period of a few minutes where I'll just try and not think. but I'm not great at it. I get distracted easily. It's hard, and I'm not motivated. I mean, I have practiced it in the past. I've gone through periods where I've tried to practice meditation, but I always end up giving up and getting out of the routine a bit. It's just sort of like to try and make myself quiet my mind, get myself in the right place, and then I'll sort of say a prayer following that and focusing on principles really. And I find that works for me. It tends to I always feel better for doing it, and I feel like I've committed to the principles within the program as well. It's a commitment, a daily commitment really of doing that. I look at it like that, and looking at sort of this Buddhist prayer, it was sort of, it says for Buddhist prayer expresses an aspiration to pull something into one's life, like a new energy or a purifying influence, and share it with all beings. But which is likewise, prayer inspires our hearts towards wisdom and compassion for others and ourselves. See, this is what really sort of resonated with me when I came across that. It allows us to turn our hearts and minds to the beneficial, rousing our thoughts and actions towards awakening. If we believe in something enough, it will take hold of us. In other words, believing in it, we will become what we believe. So it's almost, you can say that's a CBT principle, couldn't you? Really, sort of if we, practice healthy thinking, healthy behaviour. It becomes sort of automatic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So, it's a bit, sort of thinking of it like that prayer, really.
And there's no need to throw out something that works. I mean, because I have changed a lot since I've been in the program. But to be honest with you, I still will find myself from time to time reciting that Serenity Prayer, and I have no problem with it, because basically what I'm doing, I might even say the words to myself, but I don't have a belief in a deity, but I don't know. For me, it helps. Sometimes it helps me get focus on what. On where I'm at, help me calm down and focus on what I need to do, and it helps me. So that's something I learned in AA a long time ago, and even as an atheist, it's still a tool that I find valuable. And I suppose that's a form of prayer, really. It's a time where I stop and I recite something to myself and I think about it. And it helps me focus on whatever I need to be focusing on at that moment. I mean, when you think about that, accepting the things I can't change and changing the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. There's a lot of power in those concepts.
Yeah, you can take that. I mean, I've got a card with the Serenity Prayer on, and I just, particularly when I was going through that, anti sort of God phase, etc. I crossed that out and put good there, instead. So, this is relating to good as something of what I live by, and a power greater, if you like. So, but that's classic Stoic philosophy. That prayer is, it is. I always say it's Stoic philosophy in a nutshell. That accepts the things you can't change, courage to change the things that you can, and the wisdom. It's just classic Stoic philosophy. And I, looked into, don't know if you have looked into the origins of that prayer, and it was sort of something to do with the war, wasn't it? First World War, something like that, or Second World War. It was to support the troops, something like that. It was it was a paper in a newspaper, something like that. I can't remember.
Right, I think so.
I might be getting that wrong, really. But anyway, it was. I forget it. I can't remember the guy's name it was attributed to. But I'd heard that it was, or through some reading I'd done, that it was maybe an expression of that prayer was in a book called The Consolations of Philosophy by, he was an early Christian and philosopher called Boethius, and he wrote a book called The Consolations of Philosophy, but he was basically imprisoned, and while he was awaiting to die, he was going to be hanged or whatever, he had this, dialogue or conversation with philosophy, and that prayer apparently was expressed in that book, I think. So when I tried to find it, I couldn't find it, but apparently it was, but it definitely goes back to Stoic ideas, because he was a sort of Stoic as well as an early Christian, But if you learn about Stoic philosophy, I mean, like Seneca, he was a Roman, but he was a Stoic. There's a chapter in a book. I've got a modern book called The Consolations of Philosophy, written by a current philosopher, and there's a chapter on Seneca, and they should copy that chapter and put it in the big book. It's all about acceptance. He's like, that was his thing, acceptance. But it's a big theme throughout Stoic philosophy, acceptance is. So yeah, and you see that, I could just, just see Stoic philosophy sort of all over it, really. And I just think of it that way. It's just a good healthy principle, I'm
going to have to look into that. There's actually now, you're the third person I've met in AA who has talked about the Stoic philosophy. So Mark C., Jesse, and now you. Jesse gave and I actually have a recording of it. I should listen to it. But Jesse gave a workshop on Stoic philosophy at the Austin Convention. And then Mark is from Texas, and I did a podcast with him several months ago, I think, and he is really into the Stoics as well. So obviously there's something there that might be beneficial for me to take a look at.
Well, you'll recognise in a lot of modern psychology, particularly like cognitive behavioural psychology, a lot of the ideas are in that stem from that Stoic philosophy. You can just chase them back to that, and they used it as a form of psychotherapy. They saw it as a sort of way of life and a way of dealing with life and the problems, free from sort of anxiety and stuff, really. So they saw it as a form of therapy, their philosophy, So yeah, there's some really good stuff in Stoic philosophy, good principles that you will recognise them in sort of everyday psychology, if you like.
Yeah. So as we change, as we build character, and as we, as we practice these virtues and, kind of find the mean between the extremes and have some comfort with ourselves, it's almost natural, I think, for humans anyway, to maybe want to reach out and help others. And I think maybe that's one of the great strengths of AA, is that it has always stressed that our sobriety hinges upon helping others. And do you follow that view as well, as far as, when you're thinking about the 12th step as having changed and helping others? How do you view that, Steve? Yeah,
so hopefully, like I say, you've internalized by, sort of, you've been in AA a while, you've been practicing the program, working through the steps or whatever. And I'll say, hopefully, as we do that, we start to sort of internalize those values and, be more outward looking than maybe self-centered. Become more outward looking and willing to help and support other people. That sort of that sort of principles of love and service. Sort of thing. And, we start to realise the mutuality. Of helping others. But in doing so, we're helped ourselves. I always I run this group for, say, people in early recovery, and they always come up to me after and saying thank you, and I say, well, thank you for coming, because you really helped me. So I think it's really good for my recovery, sobriety and growth as a person, doing that group. It's more of an interactive group than an AA meeting, sort of thing. Bit of a teaching aspect to it as well. I really like it, that group, and I get a lot for it, a lot from it. Sorry, and like I say, so I thank them. I thank them at the end of the group, and when they come up to me and say, I always thank them, sort of thing. I think they're doing me more of a favour, So yeah, and I know for me that I when I like I say. Started accepting, sort of went through that difficult period, started accepting my own views more and being comfortable with that, and a more humanistic sort of take on the programme. I started then realising that I could help other people, and, I started sponsoring people, which I'd never really done that before, even though I'd been AA quite a long time, I started sponsoring people, and I got so much from doing that, and, realised that I'd been missing out for a long time, really not doing that. And, I got, as much, if not more, than what I gave out, what he did, he sort of helped me really connect with, the fellowship, and the principles within the program. I got them. I sort of got them on a deeper level. I really saw. I mean, some of the stuff that's expressed, saying the 12 and 12 and the big book, some of the stuff that's, the benefits of recovery that's expressed in there, I didn't really get until I started sponsoring people. And, it sort of really helped me appreciate recovery a lot more, and the mutuality of recovery a lot more, that what we do get, I think, what we give to others, we gain in equal measure, we really do. And that felt that for myself now, so I'm up for doing it as when I can, as what I can do with other people, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of find, actually for me, I think it's kind of weird. I almost feel like when I say this that I'm doing the opposite of what I'm saying. But anyway, I'm noticing that I'm actually less self-centered, that I think of others a little bit more, and I find myself, going to meetings and just appreciating being there with people who are getting something out of this and who are growing and expressing gratitude and being sober. And I don't know, I think about these people sometimes, and I think about, when they first get into the room and they're having a really difficult time, and I get to see these people get better, and it's a real gift. I consider it a gift to be part of that. And I don't know, I try to help. I don't do as much sponsoring anymore, but when as a sponsor, I guess the times when I've been most moved by, the few times I've been able to go through the inventory with somebody and listen to their fifth step. I loved that experience. The last one that I did, it was just so nice to have him over, and we sat down and we had a conversation, and these are things that it was really important for him to talk about, and all I had to do was listen. And doing that, I just was a really beautiful experience. So it's something I value. I like. It's something I wouldn't want to do without, and I think it's an important part of my life today.
Yeah, it's a great service. Just listening to it. There was you had an article, didn't you, the other week, by Galen on listening and recovery. I thought it was a great article, and it's a really valuable sort of thing that we can do for the people, is just listen to them. Just people. We all need to be heard, don't we? Really?
That's right. That's right, and that's actually, I think, a big strength of AA is the process of how we share. And we're not
uninterrupted.
We don't, and people just need to listen. We don't necessarily need the opinions or feedback necessarily. We might get that after the meeting, but just to have the freedom to talk about whatever you want, what's going on with you, and have people hear you. It's just it's huge. It's hugely beneficial.
It's like they give you that space, when people listen to you, they give you that space, don't they? That sort of for catharsis, really. But also, I don't know about you, but I find that through sharing in a meeting, uninterrupted, that I answer my own question. I don't know if I think Gabe might have expressed that in his article, but quite often you answer your own sort of problems and questions, don't you? I do. And I come away thinking, I reflect quite often, I'll share in a meeting, and afterwards I'll reflect on what I've said, and I really put things together that way. Sort of pennies drop, if you like, when I reflect on what I've shared, So it's a really therapeutic thing. And again, some of the people that I sort of help, if you like, or work with, some of them struggle to share, but I say, just, listening, being at a meeting and listening to others, you're being of service to other alcoholics, in that, if people weren't there to listen to me, I need, I'm going to speak, I need someone to listen to me, sort of thing. So we need people that listen as well, that as well as speak. So.
Well, I'll be getting my copy of your book from Lulu today. It's supposed to arrive. I'm getting the hard copy, but it's now also available on Amazon. Is it in Kindle format? And also, no, not yet. Actually, I always order a hard copy in addition to Kindles, because I like to take the books to meetings. There's a book I read recently that I'll be taking to a meeting, just to, if I see somebody that I think might have some use of it, I like to loan it out. So we've actually read, because I had a version of your book, an edition, for quite a while, and we've actually read from your book at our meetings a number of times.
I remember you saying, one of the earlier, as I say, I've just done it as I've gone along and updated it, really.
Yeah.
And it's just print on demand, sort of thing, so you can just do that. And like I say, because I've been learning as I go along and added things as I've gone along, so
Yeah, and you've got your blog too, 12-Step Philosophy, which is a wonderful resource. And I remember there was an article like about a year ago. It wasn't like one of the top 20 recovery blogs.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I just found out that you can check where you get referrals from. And I'd seen I'd got one from what's it called, After Party magazine, is it? And I'd got one from there, and I checked it out. And apparently every year, annually, they come up with a list of the top 20 blogs, and I was on that. Yeah,
Isn't that cool?
So I get quite a lot. I get quite a lot of referrals from that now. Is it equal to AA Beyond Belief? I get quite a lot from you, but I also get quite a lot. That's more of a general sort of readership, isn't it? That just mainstream recovery into it.
Is.
But I get quite a lot of people looking at my site from that site. Sort of thing.
And you also contribute articles frequently to, is it Recovery Magazine?
In Recovery Magazine, yeah.
I've
got one coming out on the 1st of July, actually. I don't know if it might be a women's issue or something she was saying, but it's the one that talks about humility. It's called, I've changed it. I think I changed it. On my site, it's called The Ego and Shame, a Barrier to Humility. But I think she's changed it to, the editor's changed it to something different on there. It's an edited version, what they're putting on there, but I sort of, I changed that up a bit as well. I think that's a good article. It's worth looking at.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
You've looked at an early version of it, haven't you? You've enjoyed it.
Mm-hmm. And I like In Recovery Magazine too. Actually, it's a pretty good magazine. It's on Issue. I might put a link out there. But
there's some great articles, and there's some really accomplished people that write in that magazine as well. You get a lot of recovery professionals and people that have achieved quite a lot, sort of in there. And they've got, these sort of really good writers, so that you get in there. So yeah, I've been there. Yeah, we got published in that quite a lot last year, and I've got a couple of articles this year that they're going to publish as well. So.
Yeah. Well, as we conclude, Steve, I'm kind of curious. Where are you? Where are you in the northern part of England?
Yeah, it's called the northwest. Yeah, okay. So near Manchester. I suppose that's one of the major cities up north.
Okay.
So I'm near there, about 20 miles south of Manchester, in a place called Macclesfield.
Okay.
So like I say, my accent, maybe you speak to someone from London, it'd be a bit different, so a bit more. I don't know. I don't know if you've had problems understanding me. You've been okay.
I've been doing okay with it. So, but, and you like to hike?
Yeah, I do a lot of walking around here. I'm really lucky. I live on the edge of the Derbyshire Peak District. So sort of got the hills, got a view, from looking out my window down, there's a really good view of the hills on the edge of the hills at the Derbyshire Peak District. So yeah, I go out in there and I sometimes go up to the Lake District, which is a couple of hours away. So go up there walking when I'm up to it, just do some mountain walking. So we're lucky. It's a really good country for hiking, this country.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful. It's kind of fun doing these podcasts because I really don't get to travel, so I kind of in my own mind as I read someone's article or get to speak with somebody from someplace else to travel in my own mind and imagine where they are. Thank you very much for agreeing to speak with me today and to talk about your book. I would really highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in 12 Steps. I enjoyed it, and I think anyone would. And the essays in the back too are very interesting as well. And a lot of this information too you can find on Steve's blog, 12-Step Philosophy.
Yeah, I mean a lot of the writings, but basically you can find them all on my website. Yeah, they're all on there, really. So yeah. But thanks a lot, for giving me the opportunity, John. It's been great to speak to you. Like I say, I sort of feel I know you really because I've listened to your podcast and I've read a lot of your stuff. I mean, you're a good writer, and you talk about being of service. I mean, the work you put into that site, that's a great. Like I say, your site and Agnostica before it have really helped me. I've learned a lot through it and, through reading the stuff on there and different opinions, etc. But, there's some really intelligent articles that you have on, they get you thinking, etc. You don't always agree with the views, but that's great, isn't it? It sort of gets you thinking, and I'll always, I'm a bit cheeky sometimes. I will, say what I think. Sort of thing.
That's cool. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot, John. I've enjoyed it, and have a great day.
Hey, you too. Well, that's it for another episode of AA Beyond Belief, the podcast. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back soon enough with another episode for your listening pleasure. Until then, don't drink, go to meetings, and help others.